As Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba announced his resignation, attention is now turning to who will replace him. The Prime Minister's resignation has also thrown up questions about the future of the LDP, the party that has ruled the country for most of its post-war history. Let's get more on this with Professor Stephen Negi from the International Studies from the International Christian University in Tokyo. Stephen, good to have you back on the program. Now, as I mentioned, Shigeru Ishiba will be stepping down. Who are the front runners to replace him?
There's primary four, and let me start with the Ministry of Economic Security, Kobayashi, seen as a competent young technocrat that really has the eye on the economic challenges facing Japan. We have the current Secretary General Hayashi Yoshimasa, who has deep experience, former foreign minister, but is seen as leaning towards China. Third, we have the young Kozumi Shinichiro, and he is seen as young, under 50, but charming, has some experience in government, and has a legacy of a father being a former prime minister. And lastly, Takeichi Sanae, the kind of chosen future leader of Japan by the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. She has impeccable conservative credentials. She's an ethno-nationalist in terms of prioritizing a nativist kind of approach to Japanese identity, and she's a hawk on China. And it's these four that are vying for the president of the LDP and eventual prime ministership.
Is there a chance that perhaps someone outside of the LDP might become prime minister?
No, I think that there's absolutely no chance of this happening. The LDP does have the majority within the lower and upper house. It's not in an absolute majority position, but it still has the majority, meaning that it will pick the next prime minister. The question is how much of the policies of the opposition parties it absorbs to broaden its base and broaden its appeal to the Japanese in general. And I think this is the really interesting question for us looking forward.
Yeah, so if they fail to do that, the LDP, bring in the opposition and some of its policies, do you see that there will be this big deadlock and perhaps it might have to force the LDP to call an early election because one is due, I think, in a couple of years from now or sometime in 2028?
So the process generally, once the Liberal Democratic parties has chosen its president, soon after they call a general election. And the reason is that they want to make sure the public is actually choosing and accepting who is the new prime minister. So what I expect after the October 9th decision of who will be the next president of the LDP. They'll be inaugurated the prime minister, that they'll soon call an election in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then the Japanese themselves will choose who will be the next prime minister officially in a public election. It's likely, again, going to be an LDP leader. The question is whether it's going to be a hawkish conservative leader or a youngish leader. And I think that right now we have 6 weeks to go to the presidential election. It's going to take some time to figure out who's going to win that horse race.
Yes, and if that election takes place, do we expect any inroads to be made by some of the major opposition parties? Like the DPJ, for instance?
No, what I see is that, again, the LDP will absorb some of the agendas of the other parties to weaken them. For example, the Sanseito has had a pretty hard line on tourism, migration, a very ethno-nationalist approach to thinking about Japan's future. So I assume that the LDP will likely take a stricter position on tourism, try to limit the number of tourists to Japan, perhaps limit the number of people from outside the country buying properties so that the ordinary Tanaka and Suzuki can afford the properties that are skyrocketing in central Tokyo. On the AI front, the Future Party by Tamaki, they may try to absorb some of the AI policies, the policies to try and become more productive, to reduce the footprint of the public servants. So I think that these are kind of the strategies that the LDP is going to try to pursue to try and weaken those opposition parties, but also broaden its base.
So whoever leads the nation, Stephen, will have to deal with a number of issues, some of which you have mentioned, rising cost of living, but also the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Is there any hope that these issues could successfully be addressed to some degree?
So the challenges facing Japan domestically are severe. It really has a demographic crisis, which is accelerating. Aging population, low birth rates. There's very few migrants coming in, replacing that. Gender inequality, debt, and more debt. So these are challenges domestically that's going to take a generation to deal with. On the foreign policy side, of course, the new president, or now 6-month-on president, and President Trump, has been unorthodox, has pushed the Japanese hard on renegotiating their trade relationship. This will continue to be difficult. And of course, there's the neighbors, China, North Korea, and Russia, who on September 3rd stood side by side in front of the Beijing's Grand Parade, looking at how Beijing sees the future, a future that requires strength, requires military power. And they sent the strongest of messages that Beijing is interested in dominating the region, which means at the expense of South Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, and unfortunately, probably Australia as well.
So going back to Shigeru Ishiba, now he was forced out by the more right-wing elements as being reported there in Japan. Now, besides the scandals that have rocked the party, was there anything else about him and his policies that led to the loss of confidence in him? Or is it just the nature of politics in Japan at the moment? It's a pretty hard job to be right at the top.
Well, the first election that he lost, many of the Japanese people said we wanted the LDP to lose, but not lose by too much. Understanding that the LDP really is the only party in town, and they needed that message to say that we're dissatisfied with corruption, we're dissatisfied with inflation, we're dissatisfied with the cost of living and stagnant wages for 30 years. And that was the message. And the second time around, Prime Minister Ishiba did lose the election. And again, I think that this was a signal to the party elders that they need a new leader. They need somebody that can move Japan in a different direction, that has confidence of the party members, but also people. And I think that this is why he was pushed out. Lastly, and I think importantly, he was seen within the conservative elements of the party as mismanaged the most important relationship for the Japanese. That's the U.S.-Japan alliance, as well as becoming too close to the Chinese. And these both really go against, I think, the consensus that was made by the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in terms of how to balance relations, have the strongest relations with the United States, Australia, Europe, build strong relations with ASEAN and India, but at the same time engage with China from a position of strength.
And just finally, as perhaps if and when Japan goes to the polls well ahead of schedule, do you see a discrepancy between how younger Japanese, those below the age of 30, what their priorities are as compared with elder Japanese? Because there is this demographic crisis, as you mentioned before.
So this is a super question, and it touches upon pensions. It touches upon how the elderly are going to fund their long lives and expensive lives as they deal with healthcare. But the elderly also are firmly attached to Japan's pacifist identity, and that means no nukes. It means a pacifist approach to dealing with defense, where the young people really are looking to the future with pessimism. They want change. They're conservative voters. They want to support the LDP, and they're anxious about their future, especially, again, as the economy continues to stagnate. But those neighbors, North Korea, China, and Russia, are becoming increasingly assertive, and they question, what is the future of Japan and its natures. And we're going to see a division here. I expect the elderly to continue to vote for rich pensions, and I expect the youth to have a more realistic approach to thinking about the economy, change, and the challenges in the region.
Okay, Stephen Nagy, always good to get your analysis there from Tokyo. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.